Yeah, I wanted to do something here about the current resident and the coupon and you know, I was kind of like thinking about the international electronic engineering and you know the thing about the current resident, and there's one particular thing about the coupon and you know God's angel and all this stuff about um, you know, proper English grammatical composition and linguistic alphanumerics in Los Angeles, or the LA thing about and you know the fact about linguistic alphanumerics or Um, but anyway, you know, I was thinking about, you know, the coupons and something about the current resident. You know, normally in residency, it's like automatically like the idea of like a med student. The current resident doesn't always suggest maybe, you know, normal perception of like um, anything that would possibly even include maybe a lien or a mechanic's lien or the current resident as you know, I wouldn't really say a deed restriction. You know, based upon you know the perception of you know the thought about a percentile on a continental level, um, as a current resident, and you know everything about you know a coupon is normally some idea of a percentile, a percentage. But in any case, yeah. So like I was kind of like thinking about that because I seem to be you know like I don't want to make it clear about a particular coupon involving like once again you know LaSix laser corrective eye surgery. And the thing about the prefix of the White House being, you know, 4, 5, and 6. And I talked about Mercedes-Benz several times um, and you know, all the connectivity about, you know, I don't know if I would call it just the acronym of the EPA or, you know, the principal practical application applied to what, you know, the Environmental Protection Agency would mean to maybe surround sound, or you know wide area network as programming beyond you know television, um, and a perception you know like available information that way, you know thing about you know easements or you know like an idea of like intellectual property being you know the thought of maybe I mean you know how true it is about a current resident or some idea as how should I put this, um, I mean if an intellectual duration is only the perception of a current resident and thing of whether or not I'm not real sure about you know I've heard it in different ways about having fair use is like the phrase for like intellectual property as compared to the thought of maybe you know it's not really discussed based upon television programming and automatically you know it seems to be whether or not if Lackland Air Force Base is only the idea of LULAC or Latin Urban League and um, the acronym LULAC. And I'm not sure. I'm going to have to actually think about the AC, but you know, Latin Urban League, and I'll have to actually think about what the AC is. But it seems to be whether or not if Lackland Air Force Base is presenting some idea, San Antonio, but you know, ultimately, like now, okay, um, being on supplemental security SSI, and I talked about you know the misappropriation allocation of the Mississippi and the ISS and the SSI that way. And, you know, I'm not going to talk about the PPI right now or the Iowa caucus, but it seemed to be the thing about the euro dollar and the US dollar and the international superstar and the supplemental security income, or, you know, the HTTP colon being the ratio and double forward slash. And I mentioned a little bit of humor about Freddie Prinze, Chico Stick, or, you know, the thing about being I waited my whole life to be polite, but I'm not going to include that like right now. Um, but you know, it's kind of like thinking about that because you know, think about the polite thing or ethnic background, and think about you know the conduct report. You know, the humor. You know, like I say, it's so phenomenally true about linguistic alphanumerics or alphanumeric linguistics, um, combined with like analytical and um, symbolic. Yeah, you know, comprehension as far as like reasoning and analytical and symbolic representation that would normally be some idea normally of like you've seen the big O thing about like Stargate and like a bunch of symbolic representation as compared to you know the thing about the pyramid and hieroglyphics, presenting some idea of like a symbolic representation, as compared to you know like the Stargate, the television series, and many people might remember the Stargate like video game and the Defender. Stargate was like one of I mean like my favorite like video game as well as Tempest and the other thing that was like at a certain location was like Joust And I'm sure that somewhere, someone probably already knew that somewhere in alphanumeric linguistics, anyone getting serious about it would probably eventually say, I waited my whole life to be polite. But that one video game called Joust, okay, it's like an amphibious horse during a kingsmanship. It's like it's amphibious, like the J. Edgar Hoover thing about, horsepower. Um, and the joust being like, like the pole. Um, like horsemen with the long poles, like they charge each other and knock each other off the horse with like a, I'm not sure if it's actually called a joust, but anyway, it's kind of like that was like there, okay, and that's like kind of like something in my mind automatically like J. Edgar Hoover that way, and that Stargate and the Defender and what that is to the Department of Defense and Stargate as far as like the warp goes, there's like a dimensional clause with like Washington D.C. That Stargate, being the thing about like Abraham Lincoln night vision shuttle government Stargate program. But the thing about the television series, it shows that big O thing, like AOL is America Online, like Apple and Oracle. The big O, like presents that big O like in a television series with not really hieroglyphics, but it's a bunch of symbolic representation on that big O thing and different other like movies involving, the information is even, in the Psychic Warrior, America's Foremost Psychic Spy, and the cover up of the top secret CIA Stargate program. As compared to the content in the book, as compared to, the book cover, you probably heard it, a picture says 1,000 words. And, that's really all I ever heard about that. But it seemed to be like something like that with the several factors of like, that one particular book and the deal about, secret, Psychic Warrior, America's Foremost Psychic Spy, and the cover up of the top secret CIA Stargate program, and the author, predominantly, the last name identified, and I'll have to actually think about the first name, but Morehouse, okay, is obviously the thing about, like ships and yachts and boats like docking and mooring and the thing about maritime law that way, and the thing about, making a grade beyond internet protocol of a local area network of maritime law seemed to be the thing about that. Okay, it seemed to be like really, and ultimately, the Stargate program, and the big O thing about, a whole bunch of symbolic issues that would be not limited to, but also probably including, symbolic representation of like the International Electronic Engineering. Symbolic is symbolic, but the Stargate thing is like completely somewhere like in between like linguistic alphanumeric linguistics, and I haven't actually like really got into looking at the symbolic representation that's normally shown on television or information involving like a Stargate program or that one particular book. It seemed to be the thing about whether or not if getting beyond the front lines of the beach run is only the issue of internet protocol, local area network, or international financial management. Presenting the word is like like the word. One of them is like globalization. It's like automatically, the thing about neighborhoods as compared to a domicile, head of household, and some idea like there's like an angel on the toilet that has a little bit of a common sense. But anyway, it seemed to be that really that ultimately, the thing about a current resident seems to be, and I'm going to, be the idea about this one particular person with white hair and blue eyes. With LaSix laser corrective eye surgery, okay, because it seemed to be the thing about Mercedes-Benz once again, and I want to include it because I'm on my new phone right here, and it just seemed to be something about Mercedes-Benz on FM 518. And other information not limited to this, but anyway, this picture right here is and I've done this before, but that is like really great, and as a current resident and a coupon, okay, and it seemed to be the thing about a percentile, and I was kind of thinking about that because it seemed to be that almost like a song by The Storm called "Got a Lot to Learn About Love," and certain other songs that seem to be like the idea of a current residence, and yeah, so like there was like some information that had presented, the idea that the EPA would be like the Environmental Protection Agency as compared to Electronic Power of America, and the thing about the band, the 1980s bands, Rush, with the camera eye that's on the signals, the signals, compact disc or MP3, MP4 format, or like YouTube. The thing with this is that actually the camera is actually on the moving pictures. Excuse me. Yeah, the analog kid and the digital mass, the signals like rush. Compact disc. But anyway, the camera eyes on like moving pictures. Okay. And the thing with this is that the thing about moving pictures is it almost presents like the high school yearbook. When publishers don't put their name of the publishing company, the street address, city, state, zip code, or really anything about it. Okay. And somewhere in my mind, that moving pictures is almost like immigration's custom enforcement and importing and exporting and international financial management and international banking systems in that way of SAN software. Whether it's going to be, the acronym of SAN software presenting, human capital as like securities and annuities, or if it's just like a storage area network, some idea of like an endorsement, representing if it's like just a news anchor, beyond the thought of an endorsement as legal media, or the thing about Social Security telephone number 1-800-772-12 and 13 being the LNM of legal media. It's even gotten to the Lockheed Martin thing about the 3 intersecting axes. Okay. And in the representation, it seemed to be the color code of like a symmetrical, asymmetrical value of like, a governmental structure, state, federal, and local authority thing about, what is called ARO, like Angleton, Texas, County Road 45. Yet it presents the symmetrical, asymmetrical factors. And now it's kind of like it presents the thing about, the television series Leave Without a Trace. And, I was like in there on ARO, and I decided I just wasn't going to sit there and do nothing, okay? And I've been there for quite some time. And, I was like looking at that shelf on the wall. And I mentioned that previously before. That Wade ASB Pretty PRDDY. But this is like on my new phone, okay, with a 435 area code of like Springdale, Utah. I think about Zion National Park and the Mormon Church, or the Mormon being 88, or some idea of whether or not if a carbon footprint or a vice president network and an absentee voting is only on the purple side of a carbon footprint representing the alphanumerics 88, Oldsmobile Dust 88 in California, and like the Roosevelt New Deal Act being 88. Yet New Deal actually is like the alphanumerics is 64, similar to the American thing, the Israel thing, and some idea, whether or not separation between church and state is only a color code of the Israeli flag, beyond some idea like the solid state in my mind is like, Southwestern Bell and Highway 59, Houston area. Being, Highway 59, Southwest Freeway is like almost like at the 8 o'clock position, whether it's AM or PM. You had a 247 degree that way. And ultimately in my mind, about, the name, Robert E. Rubin, which is the United States Secretary of Treasury, and the information between like 6 of the Temple High Federal Reserve runs the country, because that book seemed to be like a little bit more and more, identifying the New York Federal Reserve Bank, President Paul Volcker during the Ronald Reagan administration, that has led, even to the thought of like the ray gun, the laser, a sting operation, or, the thing about, it seemed to be the COVID ID-19 thing, about banking, and it seemed to be like whether or not if, the idea of COVID ID-19 is just, in my mind, automatically associate, the rainbow, not necessarily shown, although the movie, with Chevy Chase, the thing about the best defense, biblically it's kind of like in the King James Version Bible, it's like money is a defense, okay, and there's like the DD on the Texas driver's license and the Texas ID, and the misappropriation allocation to the Mississippi and the ISS and the SSI, International Superstar Supplemental Security, or the DD. I mean, it's kind of like, it seemed to be like whether or not if supplemental security income is just the idea of the DD on the driver's license being like the Department of Defense, or, the money is the defense. And that one particular movie involving Chevy and Chase, and that International Space Station, the satellite of Cognizant, having that capability of the laser. In my mind, it's the rainbow, okay? Not limited to that laser, although at the poolside, Saturn the Glass, I mean, it's almost like in my mind, not limited to like a ZZ Top, party on a patio. Yeah, so it seemed to be a little bit of something like that, and not limited to something else, going through what was then, not at the time, although like, the Abraham, it was really after the fact, that I refer to it and completely probably won't ever stop, referring to it as the Abraham Lincoln Night Vision Shadow Government Stargate program. Memory minus the fact of being 35, I mean, is really, for me personally, it was like a, right now it seemed to be, pretty close to like a 30-year, give or take, a 5-year, I mean, if you want to call it tolerance or whatever the case may be, or whatever point of origin, I mean, if it's only an intellectual duration of meaning and value and content based upon a memory, the memory minus the fact of being 35 seems to be the thing about, the state capital or human capital investment terminology, or, thought of like an intellectual duration based upon, factors that would probably be a known fact somewhere in military time. Obviously, the thing about of eternal treasuries or whatever the case may be, of the area code of Washington, D.C. being 202 or eternal treasury. Or, the thing about dimensional clause. I mean, if it's only an issue of memory being like a DC dimensional clause of a direct circuit going through a circuit, and ultimately, some idea of the BlueBird bus, going through the circuit that way, or the American Express BlueBird card. Ultimately, the thing about the Airbus H160, and in my mind, it's kind of like an experience of a blue and a white one. It seemed to be the thing about AT&T taking over, Southwestern Bell in 1990. And I'm almost certain that it is 1990 because of the movie, The Right Stuff. A 90-degree right angle, okay? And it seemed to be the thing about Sarbanes-Oxley financial instruments of stock compliance, and a little bit of humor about, Sarbanes-Oxley, financial instruments, and, the Paleolithic Anglo-Saxon, and the thing about, like a stationary engineer sitting on a toilet riding Roman chariot in Sacramento, and a Paleolithic Anglo-Saxon, a little bit of humor about Angleton and Brazoria, the Alpha of 90, and the 90-degree right angle, and that like movie about astronauts. I'm not sure how to think about it if it's including cosmonauts, but The Right Stuff is the movie. And, the Alpha of 59, or Highway 59, and being 140 in Pearland, Texas, and everything involved, it seemed really like, even with that movie and like Mark Welby to like Quincy, from like some Hio Silver deal of Quincy, ultimately, sequencing involving, the thought of like quantum, or, or military, or, thing about Diners Club and Alpha 107, and Quincy and sequencing. It's kind of like, I was at the International Electronic Engineering. Obviously it's the test of a International Electronic Engineering thing at an electrician's like apprenticeship school, and I've mentioned this previously before, and it seemed to be the thing about, what's going on world news, national news, about a covert mission, okay? And it's just like on the news during the same time, it seemed to be the thing about, some idea of like surround sound, or the thing about, the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, dropping some idea of like, wide area network in the way of surround sound, or the availability of information that way, or an intellectual duration, providing, the thing beyond, the perception of what availability means beyond, a point of origin, like information on a television, or, what's going on television as compared to, like where I've been. And that was like one of the locations, okay? But the thing with this is that, the one deal about the coupon CurrentResident is that, once again, it kind of seemed to be, the Get Smart, Get Maxwell Smart thing, and the smart car at Mercedes, because there was kind of like a, when I realized certain factors about, even the television series Special Victims in, and I really, the SUV thing is kind of like Mercedes-Benz was. All around me, beside me, in front of me, behind me, and oncoming traffic. Not limited to the 3 times, but without a doubt, at the same time, the coupon that I'm, referring to right here, or the connectivity to the Mercedes-Benz, and like, the smart car, Smart for Two, and the thing about like Cyan IQ, and this particular location on the west side of Houston, and a building, is because really the reason why I'm really mentioning is because of the Mercedes-Benz thing, and like the Rush moving pictures and Payments Made team with intense energy, and a Chase Manhattan, the camera eye thing about, a picture is a picture, and, the California Angels, even Nolan Ryan, and think about Nolan Ryan and Highway 288 being like the Nolan Ryan Express, the American Express, the Ryan, the Orion, and the AOL thing about Apple and Oracle, and the Orion being Arian and Arian, kinds of that, and alphanumerics of 213. My name, okay, here's what I want to say real quick about my name. Wade Starling Pretty being an alphanumerics of like 213. Okay, my first and last name is Wade, and my last name, P-R-A-D-D-Y, Pretty, okay? It is on the map, okay, a Texas map. The thing with it is that, it's the initials like, Washington Post. At the same time, you know, Wade, Pretty being WP, like Washington Post, apply to the Homeowners Association acronym. Okay, you know, and using the available information of the acronym HOA, Homeowners Association, with like WP being like Washington Post, presenting, you know, the Washington Post like legal media and deposition that way. And, you know, the alphanumerics of like television and electronic god, and Washington being 130, or a telepathic map, or, you know, think about a telepathic eagle, or a telepathic Bible, yeah, for real. So, like, it seemed to be, you know, with alphanumerics 130, that way, and as a dimensional clause, like Washington, using DC as a dimensional clause of a direct circuit would be, you know, like the Washington Post is like a big deal. That way, in my mind, studying linguistic alphanumerics and Los Angeles and geographics with area codes being 213, or Galveston County, and Chevrolet Silverado Z71 in Pearland. And the thing about, you know, the International Superstar, International Space Station, and the misappropriation allocation of the Mississippi, and the ISS and SSI, kind of like the HTTP colon is the ratio, a double forward slash, and making the connectivity, and certain factors had happened, and like the Mercedes-Benz, every time this particular coupon, okay, and it's kind of like, you know, really, it's kind of like an automatic, I mean, for real, okay, and the thing with this is that, you know, I've always kind of like, you know, been, you know, like looking at it, like really, since like it's there, it's kind of like, wow, yeah, I got to see more of her, yeah, for real. But anyway, yeah, so it seemed to be like whether or not the current resident is the issue of a coupon. Thinking of it in a way, whether or not if it would be the idea of like whether or not if the current resident is really something about them. You know, I don't know if I would call it intellectual as far as like management, or what that is, to the extent of whether or not if the medical power of attorney using a fixture of real estate would only be the issue of programming, whether appreciation or depreciation is or is not the issue, or whether it's a known or not known fact, or what the deal is about, you know, a vice president network, or saying software presenting the issue of absentee voting as a carbon footprint, or, you know, what that is in the Bureau of Vital Statistics. Or some idea of like, you know, some real brain work about, you know, symbolic representation based upon available information. And I was kind of like thinking about that because, I mean, you know, it seemed to be like almost, you know, I listen and practice music, I mean, so much. It's kind of like really kind of frustrating, really, you know, about me getting to my original music. Because really, for the first time, getting like all my lighting that you see like on my channel at Wade ASV Pretty, PRDY at YouTube.com, have a considerable amount of lighting. Progressively, you know, getting a little bit more and more, and beginning really in the year 2020, and then in 2022, okay, it's kind of like all these issues were like starting to happen, and, you know, it seemed to be whether or not if you know, and ultimately it got to, you know, some idea of like a screensaver, and like how, you know, and how true it is whether or not if Bill Gates is the only idea of a Stargate program or a sequencing of screensavers. And, you know, the one particular one about Europe's most wealthiest museum was like when I really knew for the first time that memory was like really the issue, and I didn't even really remember quite a bit for a duration. It seemed before really not limited to going through, you know, the circuit, okay, you know, predominantly on a 10, you know, that it really extended beyond 15 years. Really truthfully, you know, really other before, during, and after, like a 10-year really going, you know, a little bit more probably than 15 years being a 16-year period. And it seemed to be like in the year 2022, which is 2 years after I was like starting like on my channel, Wade ASV Pretty PRDDY at YouTube.com. Predominantly, you know, 2 years later being 22, it seemed to be the thing about Barbara Walters and Hugh Downs presenting 2020. And the 22 thing about, the Japanese alphabet being at a vertical, like a 90 as compared to the English language. The thing about secret de facto, like a Vantage Love 30, okay? Being secret de facto. And it's almost like, there's certain biblical scripture, the Word of God is hidden in our heart, okay? And based upon a baptism, okay? Which has ultimately become like a Six Flags thing about, a flag day, June 14th, 1992 on a Saturday morning. Obviously, in my mind, like a highest possible score on an SAT at a major university. Not limited to the thought of like a military time. Or the thing about, the highest possible score of an SAT. But it was on a Saturday, okay? And the thing with this is that ultimately, at the Mormon Church, which obviously is presenting the issue of Abraham Lincoln Night Vision Shuttle Government Stargate Program. And, it seemed to be that really, that ultimately, I haven't heard, not one word. I've sit here and thought about it for so very long and the way certain things had happened involving the alphanumeric 6 and as a point of origin that kind of like created the issue like a mandatory participating factor, okay? Going through a circuit of a 10-year extending, really beyond 15, maybe 16, but really an entire lifetime when I really thought about something about the memory. And that, somewhere in between 1994, 95, and 96, being some idea of like of a skyline being like 95 or Rampart Emergency 51, the television series, and the thing about like Lockheed Martin being like, exiting stage left of a Rush 1980s band like, compact disc or music video, concert, DVD thing about the exit stage left would be, like a interstate highway or freeway. It's referred to either highway or freeway, depending on, I guess if it just has to be the difference between, depreciation or appreciation, or whether or not if television programming is presenting the idea of like monetary and domestic, seemingly the only deal about whether or not if litigation de facto and res of habeas corpus is going to be some idea of like a investment terminology that's identifying distinguishable difference. And it seemed to be, even now, it seemed to be like the American Express BlueBird card, the 15 digit with like the gold edge, okay? And it's kind of like now, it's kind of like, I'd refer to like Aerosmith, referring to, like living on the edge and loving the elevator. It's kind of like almost like the right wing or left wing eagle on the backside of the US $1. A symmetrical, asymmetrical thing that even in the elevator, it's kind of like, loving the elevator is like almost like, are you blind, colorblind, or, is seeing that braille in the elevator. Is it right wing or left wing, or is it like really the issue between appreciation or depreciation in real estate, or whether or not if a commercial venue of living quarters is the thought of a stationary engineer that has, brains on a toilet. I waited my whole life to be polite. It's almost like the Freddie Prinze Chickle stick being, the polite thing about, some conduct report, some ethnic background issue, like a political science drum major, like conduct report, of like some wandering color code, the golden equator. For real. So, like, it really gets, between the idea of toucan salmon representing the white porcelain toilet as compared to the stainless steel and the Ohio silver, and then the thing about, what seemed to be, the real issue between, like, Marcus Welby and Quincy, and it seemed to me that a commercial venue of living quarters, normally, isn't always requiring, a full-time stationary engineer. Although it seemed to be the thing about, Lockheed Martin and like the color code and like a telepathic blueprint and television series, Leave Without a Trace, and some like, some alignments on the wall, beyond the thought of like, some some color code of like the Golden Gates and a bunch of, issues about the Soviet Union. It seemed to be the thing about, like an appraisal of a resurrection, of a military barrel determined of the mind's eye. And it seemed to be the thing about, like almost like Hunt's Ketchup in Huntsville, that way the Golden Gates, exiting, the thing about, hey, something about the Golden Gates, or the thing about, somewhere in my mind. It's not that it has to be criminology. To me, it's really about the alignment on the wall. That one little shelf on the wall. I mean, it's got two triangles, like pi r squared would be E equal mc squared, being, the biggest mouth of the river being the delta force representing the triangle. My thought of something, a little bit of humor. It's not really intended to be an insult. But, if you know anything about boycott and embargo, or some idea of, smudge-proof hieroglyphics. Yeah, in any case, so like the thing with this is about, the thing about Egypt and Harris and the thing about the alphanumerics between like Egypt and Harris and Israeli and the color code of Israeli flag being blue and white. And the thing about, the Better Business Bureau and the bird bath baptism and the alphanumeric 6 being like ABC, or the numerical value being 6, or the alphanumeric number value of SIX being 6, and the alphanumerics of V 52, and a VPN of a vice president network, or de facto being the issue between some idea between legal media and deposition, litigation, de facto reach a habeas corpus as compared to Vantage Love 30, like a secret de facto 30. And all the alphanumerics of like 30 being like 100 with the THIRTY. And the 100 Club thing about, And the thing with this is that it seems that the American Express is presenting is it a right wing or a left wing eagle? I mean, is it that being blind or colorblind, or the isometric value of a Braille would be the issue of a right wing and left wing on the backside of the US $1? Is it appreciation or depreciation, or whether or not if making a grade beyond, internet protocol of a local area network of maritime law is really the issue? Or what, deed restriction in television programming only means to a neighborhood? Or medical power of attorney using a fixture in real estate as a deed restriction based upon television programming, or even a mechanics lien, is really, the issue the way I'm seeing what's going on. And the thing with this is that, this one particular person I'm looking at is a coupon. White hair, blue eyes, I mean, phenomenally beautiful, yeah. And the thing with this is that really, it's kind of like thinking about the current resident. Really, because when I realized something about the Mercedes-Benz being on like FM 518 here in Pearland, and it being in the mailbox, hey, what's in the mailbox? Who's in the mailbox? Hey, all right, yeah. So like in any case, so it kind of got to the point of, distinguishable factors for the pronunciation of a current resident being some idea of the International Electronic Engineering. I've been to the apprenticeship out there, but it seemed to be like, the test at the International Electronic Engineering. And the thing about, the thought of like even Donald Trump and the apprentice, and it's kind of like the thing about, I just went there to do it like twice, okay? And that one particular test is like, beyond journeyman. And it would be the only, thing about, I guess you had to be there, and where it's at, like, only where it's available, because journeyman in any apprenticeship graduate of a journeyman is predominantly normally right at a bachelor degree in direction, based upon specialization and direction of what a normally unionized participating factor. Anything beyond that would be involving, masters and deal about international electronic engineering beyond an apprenticeship, even of a journeyman. And that would be only the when and where on site is really where it's at, and anything that's not, at the international level of, degrees beyond, and like major university, academics, would be like even journeyman, participating in, normally a total thought of like a thoroughly prepaid like issue, getting involved for like, like construction of like high rises, or sequencing is the deal right now seem to be the thing about, like a medical examiner, or, Barbara Streisand, somewhere over the rainbow. Excuse me, that's the Judy Garland thing. Memories like the corners of my mind, misty watercolor memory of the way we were. And it's kind of like the thing about, it seemed to be the thing about, like from Marcus Welby to Quincy, and the deal about the high yield silver. And, it seemed to be the monetary and domestic, and seemingly only of neighborhoods, and whether or not if the same was the difference between 9-hole golf courses as community is some idea of whether or not if urban and suburban is only the issue of like Ulysses S. Grant as a student loan combined with a Pell Grant, or even the EBT of electronic benefits transfer being, like snafu benefits as compared to the Lone Star card, or some idea, whether appreciation or depreciation is only the issue, whether or not if a current resident is or is not a decision or a factor in Vantage Love 30 as compared to Advantage and Vantage, a secret de facto, and it seemed to be, the rectangles on the tennis court of 9-hole golf courses. There seemed to be a thing about, the when and where a tennis court seemed to be, the thing about, investment terminology and what the rectangle is, and like Abraham Lincoln night vision shuttle gun and Stargate program of like a Lincoln Continental being the Continental like hood ornament of the rectangle. And the thing with it is that this one particular person is automatically like Faces International. Yeah, I need to see more of her for real. Yeah. So like anyway, so like in any case, so like I was thinking about that because the thing is that Mercedes-Benz being that way was like other information, at the time, and it's like the picture's a picture, and I'm talking about it. Okay, the thing with this is that it's on my channel at Wade ASV Pretty PRDDY, and somewhere in between like the zodiac, the same difference between like a calendar year and a business fiscal annual, and the difference between corporate and like business law. It seemed to be the thing about secret de facto involving Vantage Love 30 and the rectangles on a tennis court as compared to the Lincoln Continental being the hood ornament. But during the Abraham Lincoln Night Vision Shuttle Government Stargate program, I was actually taken back to the building that's on the west side of Houston, and it was only because of a rectangle. And during that time, okay, I mean, there was like a 6-month to a 9-month period of some intense time. A lot of the videos that are on YouTube, it's like during certain locations I was actually taken to, and didn't remember quite a bit about it. Okay, and it's been like going on like 35 years, really a 30-year period. And, automatically the memory of a 6 to a 9-month period, it seemed to be like really that it seemed to be that, had television and world news and national news not being involved, but it was the rectangle about a 9-degree, like a horizontal, like a landscaping, like a 9-degree of the hood ornament on Lincoln Continental. And the thing about a continental level, and in this particular coupon, a percentage of like, in my mind, automatically, it seemed to be the thing about Faces International, but she's identified with the particular coupon for LaSix laser corrective eye surgery on the west side of Houston. That was one of the locations I was taken to. And there was like, it was previously one identified with like a rectangle, like a huge granite engraved thing about, whether it's granite or marble, whatever the case is. I mean, and that was the thing when I remembered, was only the memory, because I'd been in that location because at the Art Institute of Houston, and right next door is like the Marathon Oil, corporation, Tower of Power, and Data Foundry is the thing about it that's inside of that particular building. I do believe it's still there, although Marathon Oil, where they've went, I'm not real sure, but I think Data Foundry is still inside that Tower of Power. Okay. And likewise, they have another location out in the Greens Parkway area. But, like a Data Foundry actually presented SAN software. More so, it seemed to be of neighborhoods of like monetary and domestic and monetary, of the M1 and M2, like, aggregates, and presented SAN software that way because, in the beginning, it was identified as like Data Foundry presenting SAN software, and then it seemed to, change to like, gross national product in the way of like a commercial venue of living quarter, and the 240 volt thing of the acronym IEEE, and with the big O being the International Electronic Engineering Organization, and the AOL thing about Apple and Oracle, that's compared to the Orion Performance Monitoring, seemingly like in my mind, being the ARIAN, the Aryan, and some factors about the backside of the US $1 bill and the euro dollar, and it seemed to be that halo side of like a Nuit, the Coptis. A lot of people pronounce it the Coptis whenever you hear it. I very rarely hear anyone talking about it. I talk about it quite a bit when I start, and YouTube's really only where I talk about it, really even more so than really anywhere else, like period. And really the only reason why it is because like all this has been going on. Okay, because in 2020 is when I really started getting you know, kind of serious with all my lighting, okay, here in my home. Um, and then in 2022, you know, some considerable issues resulting in me for like a 16-month period that has really, you know, had the effect, it seemed to be like going beyond that, okay, with like 911 calls to, you know, uh, having to go through the ER emergency room with admitting diagnosis that was like happening pretty close to like a 1 month period. I mean, excuse me, for like close to a 5 day and night stay, like almost every single time, with a fluctuation maybe of a 6 day and night. I think one time was only like 6 days and nights, and like on the seventh next day in the morning. But predominantly it was like an automatic 4 day and all night, day and night thing, and a 5 day and night with like a drip of like heparin, a blood thinner. And it seemed to be like an ongoing issue with like hospitals, resulting in my thing that it seemed to be that it was like the admitting diagnosis of congestive heart failure. And the way everything has happened, I mean, I did not believe not one thing. Even urology and endocrinology became the issue of like, you know, circulation. And whether or not, you know, the key to the city would only be the ideal of whether or not the Vice President Network or Immigration's Custom Enforcement is some idea of some issue of like, you know, access. In any case, so like, you know, it became an issue whether or not if I could even maintain, you know, what's on the table of contents in my own home, even with endocrinology, as a result of like circulation, okay? Or that guy man dude thing, you know, the guy man, you know, hood ornament thing, you know, and, you know, automatic surface air. Hey, it's good to see you. I mean, for real, okay? But in any case, so like anyway, the thing with this is that it resulted in, and automatically it became like a capillary blood vessel issue. I mean, years of it, and not even realizing it, but really, it seemed to be the thing like in the year 2022, 2 years after when I really got on YouTube.com with my music videos of all the standards as a drummer and a singer, okay, that I chose as a standard for a music video portfolio, with no any other intent really in that way, but as a drummer, it just you know, have a music video. And like I said, you know, I'm like more beyond, really way beyond 3,000 songs, and you know, probably closer to 300, you know, bands, singers, and yeah. In any case, you know, like I mean, even at like 3,000 individual songs, I mean, me making any kind of like mistake, I mean, it's really just not it. I mean, like what's been going on had been really an issue that had, and whatever the deal is about, you know, we international or whatever the case is, and I don't know if it's really the memory. It seemed to be, you know, almost like an idea like that has led almost the anticipation of, you know, maybe thinking that maybe the memory would be probably the assumption of like, you know, geniuses involving FBI psychology minus RCA, or the 22 thing, ultimately the Japanese language being 71 in Pearland. And it seemed to be the only thing about quantum that ultimately has a structure that calculus does not. Although it has the different by design E in calculus, and I think how true it is about the algorithm, I'm not real sure about everything about the algorithm, but it's almost like an EPA standard, kind of like, hey, I'm looking right at it, and it's so true about alphanumerics and linguistic that way. I mean, I almost see the algorithm automatically as William Jefferson Clinton and Al Gore. I mean, for real. I mean, it's kind of like, you know, it's kind of like you got, it's kind of like I was thinking about that, because automatically when I hear that word algorithm, which wasn't the issue like then, okay, but it was introduced in algebra, okay, but I don't remember like using it. I mean, at all. And that may have been some idea like the EPA thing about Environmental Protection Agency or Electronic Power of America. I mean, in the classroom, and not even realizing what an algorithm really is, okay? Yeah. So, I mean, it may have been very well something about really like I'm looking right at it in the classroom, and not really realizing what an algorithm is, although I am a drummer. Yeah. So, you know, the thing about it is almost like the band Yes, and I'm a little, you know, I'm kind of like having a thing about a particular song by Yes, is this life is not for living, it's for fighting and for war. I kind of might be a little upset a little bit about maybe, you know, like I'm a drummer, okay, and I sing all that and practice all that. And I mean, if it's somewhere in constitutional law, okay, it's kind of like, hold on, I mean, like, okay, I bought a compact disc, okay, In any case, it's kind of like, whether or not if a deed restriction involving a medical power of attorney based upon television programming, using fiction in real estate, or even a mechanics lien, or, some idea of like programming, or the thought of like, hey, I like spriting you, and some idea of jurisprudence with a black back in the book. I mean, it seemed to be like whether or not, if really, if that one word repudiation in jurisprudence is ultimately getting to whether or not, it seemed somewhere in my mind, it seemed to be like comptrolling, using regulatory commission somewhere between annotation of litigation having de facto as like an easement between, like, whether it's going to be appreciation or depreciation based upon television programming. I mean, it's so like not taught. I mean, not one word about, in my mind, automatically political science, drum major. In any case, so like, I was kind of like thinking about that because, like, like everyone knows I love the sound. And what I listen to really and practice on my drums, I love the sound. There's no line about it because, virtually everything I practice is like, the best thing on the entire planet, probably the entire universe, for real. And, sometimes, getting beyond the complexity and getting back, to sometimes, I wouldn't really call it simple, but it really gets to a point, to where the idea of like, I'm really not competing with like anyone, although a standard and me getting to my band, and my original music is like really kind of getting a little frustrating. Thing that maybe something about, royalties or what lifespan is as de facto. I am so not for sure everything that's involved. For real, not funny. Because it's kind of like, if it's ultimately getting to the thought of, communications or distance learning, or for real, or a Roe v. Wade. My name is Wade, okay, or the issue between like Wade, or Wade being 33 and like Aryan. Okay, my name is Wade Sterling Prudy, alphanumerics of 213, and when I really got serious about alphanumerics and linguistics, okay, my thing was about being amphibious like J. Edgar Hoover, and beyond maritime law. Even, the thought of like transportation involving four wheels, predominantly of an American Idol thought of like 800 RPM with like virtually any vehicle on the highway, the freeway, being more along of like aviation and, jets and airplanes, being amphibious that way. Even the hovercraft of J. Edgar Hoover being amphibious, and it seemed to be the thing about the Rangers and the Texas Rangers, and the thing about the Queen seemed to be the real thing. The real Rangers of the Queen seemed to be the thing. Of degreed academics, of the hovercraft, of the Rangers. The real degreed, Rangers, not limited to, and involving the hovercraft. And my thought, like, being the amphibious thing about J. Edgar Hoover, the hover and the hovercraft, and J. Edgar Hoover, and the humor, about obviously, the Hoover vacuum cleaner. And the thing about, the vacuum is it's that weird science question. So it seemed to be the amphibious thing about brands, the humor, but it seemed to be the question in the movie Weird Science. Will a penny fall faster than a feather in a vacuum tube? It seemed to be so academic, yet humor and ridiculous at the same time. And the thing about a penny being Abraham Lincoln, that hood ornament. Will a penny fall faster? And it's kind of like we hear like Colonial Penn have changed our name to the almost artesian communist, adjusting the Pinocchio barcode. GMC's like racing the ball, yet at the same time, it's almost like Annette Penicello is Pinocchio. Annette Penicello and the Mouseketeers, ratifying, codifying law and constitutional law, ratifying, codifying United States constitutional law. Annette Penicello is Pinocchio. And we here at Colonial Pens have changed our name to the almost artesian communist, adjusting the Pinocchio barcode because Annette Penicello and the Mouseketeers is ratifying. Like, are you kidding me? Annette Penicello is Pinocchio? Are you kidding me? That's like the county and country issue in proper English numerical composition, and a P being visible and pronounced, and a P being visible and like not pronounced. Saying it or not saying it would be the same as the difference of like some like retro, cross-referencing between like not hearing it and not seeing it based upon not hearing it. Although you know that about, proper English numerical composition that way. It seemed to be almost like the Annette Penicello, and that one thing about the H. and her name Pinicello, and all of a sudden it's Pinocchio. It's almost like attenuation and attention being the UA thing, the AU and the UA and the 22 about, you know, in my mind, quantum and the sequencing of like quantum between like the thing about, you know, monetary and domestic aggregates, identifying some idea of like being like Marcus Welby and like a fixture in real estate being used as a deed restriction based upon television programming, having access, and Quincy being like the medical examiner. It's almost like Barbara Streisand. Memories like the corners of my mind. Misty watercolor memory of the way we were. And it seemed that the misty watercolor rainbow is almost like, I mean, you know, automatically in my mind, Orion performs monitoring with the hot air balloons presenting the rainbow. Just because of like a hot air balloon presenting, you know, based upon, you know, the temperature and altitude presents the mandatory requirements of a rainbow of condensation and evaporation. Yet Barbara Streisand sings the misty watercolor memory. It's almost like, you know, the shots by 999 of Mork and Mindy measuring, you know, like the impedance and ambience of the pastel colors, the impedance being the pastel green. I mean, the impedance being the pastel red and the ambience being the pastel green of like nano units measuring density and luminance. And the green and red is the night vision predominantly. I've seen another color, a newer color that's here recently. I think there's 3, possibly always have been, but predominantly the green and red has always been a thing of night vision, of military time, and they've been showing a different, and in addition now, like 3. I actually think what the color actually is, I think it's a little bit more, I'm going to have to think about if it's really the idea of something orange, or the Orange County being some combine between geographic and the football and globalization and like UCLA and like the color code of like the misappropriation allocation in Mississippi from like I-10 from Los Angeles all the way to Florida, and the misappropriation allocation in Mississippi based upon that fact being Miami, being a misappropriation from I-10 like HTTP and, you know, sequencing, characterization and sets for binary numbers and computer programming and language, and it seemed to be the color code of Miami presenting, you know, the aqua and the blue and the orange that way of like Miami Dolphins. Geographically, it's also like one of the major universities of like attenuation, and I think if I'm not mistaken, normally when you see like a license plate with, you know, Sigma Alpha Beta Kappa Phi, I think it's 5, but Sigma Alpha Kappa Beta Kappa Phi, I think that's 5. I think that is all the symbolic, I think that's actually including symbolic representation of Stargate. I think that is the great geniuses of like attenuation involving the 24, 48, 72, and 96 increments normally of, you know, customizing waveform in post-production and editing, yet of quantum, of live, the vertical thing about quantum being live and not an issue of post-production or editing. It's not supposed to be editing, yet it presents the issue, the difference between MP3 format and like MP4, and like, you know, the NFL having those instant replays, I mean, in the blink of an eye, and have a multitude of different angles, perceptions, and I mean, even effects, I mean, in a blink of an eye with all those options, distinguishing legal media of auditing, I mean, with that kind of capability, I mean, it's so not funny. Or EA Sports combined with some idea of like YouTube, it's like, really? I mean, seriously not funny. Something about that, and and you know, all the factors it seem to be like involved, okay? And the thing with it is that really, it's kind of like I was kind of like thinking about that. It's already gone like, God, 53 minutes in late. 59 seconds, yeah. Wow. But anyway, so, I mean, it seemed to be like the color code of attenuation. The thing about the UA being 22, or Japanese being, you know, think about reading from top to bottom and some idea of like quantum. And I think it very well may be the two exact, if not the thought, hey, that looks like Japanese, and the structure in quantum only being 2 of them. And that's the thing it seemed to be, you know, about the FDIC, whether or not if appreciation or depreciation is the idea of protecting a U.S. patent, or loss prevention as a method of banking, of like a checking account of an endorsement, or the idea of a vice president network, or some idea of like an entrance exam like designating, Vice President Network of Abraham Lincoln's Shadow Government Stargate Program. And Abraham Lincoln Night Vision Shadow Government Stargate Program had it been they themselves, and thinking, it's kind of like, hey, at the same time, it presents, whether or not if the idea of like Japanese, being read from top to bottom is the only factor about quantum, and whether if it's live or post production or Washington Post presenting like legal media as Washington, the alphanumeric 130, as compared to Washington Post, that would be same difference between legal media and deposition. That way apply to like the homeowners association, the HOA, HOA, and combined with WP being like whoopa, the pronunciation of the blue and purple bird, the Israeli bird, as compared to Austin Powers' Bluebonnet Imperial Eagle, the state flower band, the Bluebonnet, and the Imperial Eagle is kind of like I can't believe it's butter, the HTTP colon, including the ratio, but the colon predominantly of I can't believe it's butter of the Bluebonnet Imperial Eagle being the Bluebonnet butter, the stick of butter, the rectangle, and Imperial butter, the rectangle, the sticks of butter, yeah, and the colon, HTTP colon, Austin Powers Bluebonnet Imperial Eagle. And the ratio thing about double forward slash and looking forward, yeah. Yeah, so like anyway, so like in any case, so like all that information is kind of like studying alphanumerics and linguistics have been predominantly in a bunch of available information, and I think this is getting close to an hour now. I'm going to try to and think about certain factors about it, but it's kind of like thinking about the current resident and think about the International Electrical Electronic Engineering, and think about Wyatt Earp and alphanumerics of 39, the ERP, the exclusionary rule provision of like executive powers, governmental amnesties, and sovereign immunities. It's kind of like think about in my mind like the writ litigation de facto and res habeas corpus between Wyatt Earp and John Wayne. Yeah, so like going on and on and on. I mean, it's just like a world and universe of like information. Explain something that I've really spent like decades really since really, and I mentioned I'm going to mention it again because I want to say something about the June 14th on a Saturday morning baptism at the Mormon Church, okay, and not many days hence, okay. I'd mentioned it before because it's like kind of like a it's kind of like watching TV, and I had this mental magnetic perception, almost a lifting like a mental telepathy thing, like a telepathic birth, okay, kind of like a mental magnetic perception, and then it's kind of like went straight through the television. I mean, for real. And I was laying in bed. It's like the same night. I mean, several hours later, I kind of like had another experience, and it seemed to be the thing about a heart god, and how true it is, whether or not if it's a Robert Half issue, presenting the combine of Ulysses S. Grant, named he himself of President of the United States, or the idea of a Pell Grant, a student loan combined with a Pell Grant, or the thing about EBT and the SNAP food benefits combined with like a Lone Star card. I mean, or if it's going to be appreciation or depreciation based upon a presidential debate. And it seemed to be a thing about, Vantage Law 30 that way of secret de facto. More and more it seemed to be the issue whether or not if, Marcus Welby and Quincy is only presenting the issue like, Marcus Welby being the monetary and domestic of like the aggregates of neighborhoods. And Quincy, like the medical examiner, the high-O silver thing beyond the toilet of a medical examiner presents the high-O silver likewise in addition. But the name Quincy, I mean, ultimately, seemed to be the sequencing. Okay, and the thing about sequencing, okay, it seemed to be like whether or not if a deed restriction is being, a medical power of attorney or fixture in real estate is being used as a deed restriction based upon television programming, or what the real deal is about a method of banking of international banking systems, or some idea of endorsing some idea of like a checking account of employers into a personal checking account, and all of a sudden it seemed to be whether or not if depositing an endorsed employment check into a personal checking account is still the idea of like the difference between business and corporate law, or the acronym of a VPN being a vice president network as compared to a virtual personal network, or the acronym DBA as a database administration as compared to doing business as like it's taught as a paralegal. Not really identifying, Ulysses S. Grant as some presidential debate between a student loan combined with a Pell Grant, or SNAP food benefits combined with the Lone Star card, or appreciation or depreciation as M1 and M2 aggregate of monetary and domestic. The way I see the 240 of the euro dollar, and that symbolic symbol on the backside of the US $1 between the C and the PTIs to the upper right of the I above the pyramid on the left side of the US $1 bill, and it seemed to be the haloed side. And once again, it seemed to be the euro thing about that symbolic representation of alphanumerics being involving mental telepathy, mind is God, being Holy Spirit, seek serving Jesus Christ, and all the alphanumerics of U151. Ultimately, the thing about telepathic brainwaves, and the thing about it, is that it ultimately gets to some other factors that seem to be whether or not if appreciation or depreciation is only really, the who knows anyway form is kind of like really not a funny situation, and I think just like being on YouTube is whether or not if the idea of like intellectual property is only an issue that would identify like we international being the alphanumerics 181, Houston, Texas, and electronic power, and the acronym of electronic power being the EPA, or whether or not if it's really an issue of like intellectual property that way of the EPA and Electronic Power of America presenting the idea of Environmental Protection Agency like a U.S. patent is in my mind automatically a 240 volt issue of commercial venue of living quarters that's not affected by television programming of K television or K radio or even W television or W radio. In my mind, it's automatically the gross national product side. Possibly the thing about, the energy thing involving the Roosevelt New Deal Act between Theodore and Franklin Roosevelt, which is 6 presidential terms between, Theodore and Franklin Roosevelt, and what Franklin is to Harris that way, or Egypt, or Israeli. And the thing about the code blue seems to be the Southwestern Bell presents the color code of, the HPD thing, like the Houston Police Department. And how true it is about the solid state thing about Southwestern Bell being the idea that it's not AT&T, although the acronym AT&T presents the, alphanumerics of 41, USA, home, alien. And the thing about the alphanumerics of, like, 41, AT&T is, about that, and it's blue and white. And like I said before, the colors of AT&T is like everything that's in the white pages is white about AT&T. The directive 1411, 411, 1411 of directive, what is normally white, not in the law library, is normally blue in the law library. A lot of city administration, as compared to a business to business, the thing about administration and the thing about, certain factors involving, international law, involving intellectual duration, and in my mind, it seemed to be the thing about the exclusionary rule provision, the Wyatt herb, involving food, Wyatt's cafeteria, yeah, and SNAP food benefits, and like combined with a Lone Star card as compared to a student loan, combined with like a Pell Grant. The GI Bill seemed to be whether or not if presenting a House bill in the legislation potentially passed into law is whether if it's involving aggregates or a neighborhood defined as monetary domestic, or if a deed restriction based upon the idea of television programming is only the thought of whether or not, if the who knows anyways form, is only the thought of whether if a neighborhood is appreciation or depreciation or even knows the difference. And ignoring any of this is like what I'm not doing. I'm about, getting and having, for real, a commercial venue, a living quarter. Considering everything that's happened, and another day, and it's going on and on and on. I'm 59 years of age, okay? And, some real serious stuff. Really, originating, really not limited to, but obviously a baptism, June 14th, 1992, Friendswood, Texas, at the Mormon Church, right off near Sunset Boulevard. Down at the Sunset Grill, like the Eagles saying, huh? And, I've seen it, desert, and pronunciation and spelling, the actual street that the Mormon church is. But the thing is that there seem to be, 6 flags. And the alphanumerics is 6, being 52, and the VPN being 52, and the Vice President Network, or, the issue of whether or not, if an endorsement of a checking account is identifying whether or not, if a DBA is a database administration, or doing business as. So what's the endorsement really mean? I mean, it's like an entrance exam for an Abraham Lincoln night vision Shuttle-Gate Stargate program. I mean, not one word to this day. I mean, I've studied African American linguistics that much about like what's really been going on, okay? And the thing with it is that really, I mean, you know, as a turning point, it's been the African American 6. I mean, because of a baptism and about a 15 to 16 month period later, and then like 3 phone calls, and 6 months later, I mean, I have studied African American so much that when I was on the one particular thing about the African American 6, and realizing that the 6 is ultimately SIX and like 52, and a VPN, Vice President Network, or Virtual Personal Network. I mean, I was like on it all the time, and I did it so much before I even realized it. I realized I was using 4 different methods of accomplishing a numerical value of 6 as compared to an alphanumeric. And I realized that I did that 4 different ways. I did it that much that I realized that I actually was using 4 different methods to actually accomplish alphanumeric, linguistic, symbolic, and analytical combined. I mean, with like, you know, reasoning and all the brain work about, you know, alphanumeric linguistics, including, you know, analytical and symbolic. In geographics, I mean, bibliography and medical terminology, legal terminology, international law of like intellectual property. I mean, I've studied it that much that it seemed to be, and I hadn't got to the point of whether or not if those 4 different methods is only some idea of the 3rd and 4th generation that's like in the King James Version Bible, or, you know, predominantly the alphanumeric chronological from A to Z being, you know, ultimately, you know, 1 to 26, 27 to the 52, then 53 to 78 being the 3rd, Z78, and the 79, so like 104 being the Z 104, like the 3rd and 4th generation. It seemed to be whether or not if that's really the issue of the aggregates M1, M2, and M3, and why one pronoun of the 4 types of pronouns cannot be used as a subject. And it seemed to be the RPM on Highway 288 presenting, you know, why one pronoun of the 4 types of pronouns cannot be used as a subject. It's almost like the RPM of like black vinyl records presenting the 33, 45, and 78 RPM as compared to the American Idol idea of transportation being the alphanumeric 200, the bicentennial quarter, bicentennial drummer, or a plenipotentiary, and the American Idol that way of 800 RPM, and a RPM like on Highway 288. It seemed to be the thing about why one pronoun of the 4 types of pronoun cannot be used as a subject, because RPM is further south, like a subject or a suburban issue, or like Bass Pro on Highway 288, right at, you know, Sam Houston Tollway, the South Beltway 8. And it presents all that graphite issue between the birth certificate and the copying process of, like, you know, papermate being the issue of, like, you know, not biometrics but fingerprints. But yet it seemed to be that graphite in Mobile 1 is the connectivity of graphite between the paste of a birth certificate and the footprint. And, you know, the copying process involving papermate in 5610, ultimately getting to the alphanumeric 94, adoption, abortion, and, you know, annotated. It seemed to be like the Roe v. Wade thing. And now it's like the FBI location of the One Justice Park, and my name Wade being, you know, the thing about 33, and Aryan, it seemed to be the difference between like maritime law, and, you know, the Air Force and the Navy, and you know, what the idea of the front lines of the beachfront and surfing the internet seemed to be at the front lines of the beachfront, and getting to the Aryan thing about, you know, the RPM and the American Idol, and like the Roosevelt New Deal Act being some like easement of intellectual duration between like litigation de facto and res habeas corpus. And it seemed to be the Roosevelt New Deal Act is seemingly something in my mind of like de facto, New Deal being like 64 and ACTP and American, and, you know, the thing about Zion, 1,000 Years of Peace being all 64, movie and all that stuff about it. And you know, that's why, like, this time, like, my phone number I'm on now, it's like a Springdale, Utah number, specifically because of Zion National Park, being the 435 area code. I'm here in Pearland, Texas, like I've always been. Not limited to, but yeah, predominantly, yeah. In any case, so like now, I'm doing it like again, okay? And the thing with this is that all this information, I'm already going like on an hour and 9 minutes, and in 41 seconds, yeah. So, wow, I mean, I'm like going on and on and on and on, yeah. So, like, I want to include that because, real quick about the American Express. And once again, it's kind of like Aerosmith presents, living on the edge and loving the elevator. And it seems to be now whether or not if the American Express BlueBird card with the gold edge is the issue or not the issue of appreciation or depreciation, or the golden equator as a 90 degree, and whether or not if the right wing or left wing is the idea of whether or not if McDonald's golden arches is both cycles above the equator, or if the right wing or left wing issue between a new accomplished minus transfiguration equaling 12, a miracle God or the truth, and what Baby Ruth is to the truth. Because the alphanumerics, I think it's 204, a new accomplished, with its symbolic representation, once again equating to like McDonald's hot cafe coffee cup, and it is the actual letters. But when I did it, it went automatically hot cafe or the McDonald's, hot cafe coffee cup. But those are the alphanumeric letters and values numerically, and alphanumerically, when that symbolic representation is like the euro dollar, the haloed left side of the E being a O, a C, and individually, like added to the 5 individually, like C plus 5, and then the O plus 5, and then the A plus 5, and then that together, and then individually, okay, and then all of it combined, and then individually, the haloed left side being like the euro dollar, and ultimately getting to 59 over like some issues of whether or not if a 9 degree is really ultimately the simplest difference between quantum and the equator of on-site location, the field scope and range of law, that way of that one haloed left side and the euro dollar, predominantly of 240 volts, that presents that on gross national product of products like the United States is to a patent, as compared to whether if loss prevention is the only idea as a method of banking of a checking account of a 16-digit card, as compared to the American Express 15-digit with the gold edge being a 15-digit, and now it seems to be like I'm experiencing an issue whether or not if it's a right wing or left wing issue, or whether or not if a new accomplished has the Mount Olive issue of like re-entering heaven. And after the third day, the Lord Jesus Christ was resurrected and went to Mount Olives and ascended into the sky. It's called the Transfiguration of re-entering heaven, the alphanumerics of 192. And it seemed to me that's the only real issue involving a new accomplished is that one word, alphanumerically, and a symbolic representation equating to 58. I think it's 204 minus 192, which is the Transfiguration about re-entering heaven, okay? Equaling 12 numerically, and alphanumerically 87 of like, a miracle God or the truth. And the list goes on and on about 87, or the exact opposite being 78, or a hard God, or Robert, or escrow. And it goes, between the Pentagon Reserve Reverse and the intelligence and opposite and a telepathic face, and the alphanumerics 115 and 92 being the Pentagon. Obviously a drummer, and I'm a drummer in any case, so like, I get serious about the bicentennial quarter that way. About, everything about the alphanumerics of 200 and Richard Nixon and even Lyndon B. Johnson. Excuse me. But yeah, it seemed to be really an odd if, Aerosmith singing about Lockheed, really singing about Lockheed Martin, the 2 open arrows and the 4 lines and the 3 intersecting axes, and it seemed to be the thing about the telepathic blueprint of federal, state, and local authority. Like, I don't know if I just have to call it a governmental structure, or, the business hours of ATM is an ATM, more so of a storage area network of the categorization of money, ultimately getting to COVID ID 19, alphanumerics of 72, or First being 72, First City National Bank. I think First City National Bank, I think in the United States, is the first national bank that actually left the categorization of money. And I think it's predominantly, a big deal that really I hadn't heard anything about. But I was actually involved with like building that high-rise in Houston, in between like Fannin and like San Jacinto and Polk and Clay, right there in Houston. I think it's 24. I think it's 24 floors. Aerosmith thinks about living on edge and think about pouring concrete from floor to floor on a high-rise building, like with a huge vibrator vibrating all the air out of the wet concrete to get all the air bubbles out of it, so it would like not have any stress cracks based upon the air bubbles, and strengthen it that way to prevent any disintegration or any kind of stress or fracturing or anything like that. But anyways, and then ultimately, the edge, living on the edge seemed to be the thing about and now it seemed to be whether or not if it's a right wing eagle or a left wing eagle or appreciation or depreciation or the monetary and domestic of like neighborhoods or the 240 volt, predominantly the international electronic engineering and the alphanumerics of 39. In my mind, it seemed to be the deal about being, if you be led by the Spirit, ye sins shall be forgiven. Hold on right there, wait a minute. There's like Del Taco being led by Taco. Yeah, there's like Del Taco going on with a color code, okay? And it's like a known fact in Pearland that Del Taco is like a California thing. Being led by a taco, being led by an angel. Being led by Herb. Yeah, being led by Wyatt Earp and like Diners Club, right? Exclusionary rule provision, yeah, like the alphanumerics of 39 and Taco and OPEC and being led by Taco, yeah. So like that biblical scripture, and it's kind of like almost really not funny at the same time. If ye be led by the Spirit, ye sin shall be forgiven. What sin? What are you talking about? Not going to Taco Bell, being led by a light emitting diode, a light emitting diode angel, being led by a taco, huh? Del Taco, huh? It's like the California thing, and the thing about energy involving the New Deal Act, it seemed to be like a duration because I was kind of like following the Roosevelt New Deal Act, and it seemed to be like a period that involved like OPEC and energy, probably ultimately even Del Taco, and it seemed to be things that really it seemed to be the factor of center point energy, and the smart meter and the transmission and delivery provider. And so getting maximum smart seemed to be the thing that really, I didn't get to read everything about it, but I realized I was following it. It's like trying to find the information, and I realized that a duration actually presented the energy side of the New Deal Act. And ultimately it seemed to be the big old thing about the International Electronic Engineering being the IEEO being alphanumerics of 39 as compared to the alphanumerics of 24 being the IEEE and GMAC being 24 and HOA being 24. Then ultimately it seemed to be getting to the Israeli bird, the whoopa, and Washington Post, or my initials being Wade Pretty, the WP, the same initials as like Washington Post, presenting the legal media and deposition that way. Even the Social Security Administration number being 12 and 13, being L&M, ultimately, legal media or Lockheed Martin. And it seemed to be that, the telepathic blueprint in television series leave without a trace, because it ultimately gets to, like in my mind, ultimately a 5-eccentric triangle that presents the same pronunciation and practical application, okay, of describing it. Yet it's 5 eccentric triangles. In my mind, the Fifth Dimension song, Up in the Air in a Beautiful Balloon, and Orion Performance Monitoring, presenting the hot air balloons in a rainbow. Ultimately, Fort Stockton, Texas, and the James Null unit, okay, and the alphanumerics of 200, and all that stuff I've been referring to, involving, even Richard Nixon and, even the Colorado Club in the Houston area. Anyone knows anything about Chevrolet Colorado, or the thing about even Colorado and Boulder, Colorado, and Morgan Mindy. Seemed to be the U.S. constitutional thing about the Spore Stone and orthopedic surgery. It seemed to be the deal about the weather and the forecast and the weather, Warner, Electra, and Atlantic. The forecast, it seemed to be about the deal about the Spore Stone. And like I mentioned before, going through the Stargate program and realizing that memory had been a big issue between a 25 to 30 year period going on 35 years now. And combined with like AT&T taking over like Southwestern Bell in 1990, and all the public phones being removed, the code blue only being inside, seemingly like where that's at. In any case, so like it seemed to be the thing of a 35 year period being this year, 2025, from 1990 to like now. And I'm thinking about AT&T or some idea of like memory minus de facto being 35. And also empowers BlueBird and paralegal and computer programming and language and all that stuff. But anyway, I'm going to have to seriously take a break. It's going like a pretty close to an hour and 20 minutes. It's like an hour and 19 minutes and like 51 seconds right now. So I think I'm really going to take a break right now. And yeah, all right, yeah. So I'm going to keep this in mind for real, and it seemed to be like really for real about a current resident and what it is as a coupon. God's angel, yeah, for real. So like I've been thinking about that quite a bit because of the thing involving Mercedes-Benz that way on 518. Not limited to, but it seemed to be like also included. I want to mention this real quick about New York television programming involving the SVU, Special Victims Unit, as compared to, likewise, in addition, coming through Pearland was a bunch of SUVs having a Z71 on. I mentioned this previously. I want to make sure it's on my new phone with the 435 thing about, my thing about the Utah and the Mormon and the thing about the Springdale being like Zion National Park and all that stuff about, when you see a mountain climb it and all that stuff between, the Alaska Pipeline being the Keystone thing and the De Beers Diamonds in the book Secrets of the Temple, How the Federal Reserve Runs the Country. And it seemed to be like when you see a mountain climate issue and something almost like, running stands, when you see a mountain climb, it's almost like running stands in a football stadium. And the difference between like Coors Light when you see a mountain climb it, and the deal about De Beers Diamonds, a European, German-owned mining raw diamonds, and the thing about the color code of Chevrolet Geo Prism and the colors of like a rainbow, okay? But the thing of it is that Alaska has the Keystone Pipeline from Alaska all the way to Houston, and anyone who knows the difference, between Keystone, it's just Keystone beer, but it's like really Coors Light is the thing about it. But that pipeline is seen to be the Keystone thing and a color code, a solid blue code blue. Likewise, in addition, yet it's almost like the high silver of Coors Light, because anyone who's ever, I don't drink beer, and that would be the only if I ever do, but I haven't drank any alcohol or beer really, but I know that much about Keystone Light and like Coors Light, as they say they taste like virtually the same. And that's the pipeline from Alaska all the way to Houston, okay? And the thing about the De Beers Diamonds is identifying, mining raw diamonds in South Africa. And I want to mention this again real quick. The information in Secrets of the Temple, How the Federal Reserve Runs the Country, is that the European, German-owned mining raw diamonds is in South Africa. But the information is interchangeable. It's really the South United States and Houston. In practical application, it is Egypt and the Sahara Desert and the Persian Gulf and Egypt. Yet it's in the book, it's presenting the information that link Egypt to like Harris in the Houston, Texas area. And it's really like South United States in the Houston area. Yet it presents, the Alpha-Americans 73 in Harris and Union in Egypt and Israeli that way. And all this information of communications and the huge triangle and the eccentric triangle of like I-10, from Los Angeles, all the way to Florida. And it presents the eccentric triangles. There's even a screensaver of the triangles that presents it bouncing off, each, side of a screensaver on a monitor, a computer monitor. And the triangles are overlapping and bouncing off the walls, and they're eccentric. And that's, in my mind, the thing about the fifth dimension, and it being eccentric that way of like I-10, of the information and the certain books, and it's not limited, it seem to be involving also like Turbulent Waters and Nimitz Class and Secrets of the Temple, How the Federal Reserve Runs the Country. I'll have to actually think about, the House of Cards that predominantly focuses on like international monetary funding and hedge funds as compared to aggregates. But I think it's really probably more so of a degree level terminology of, you've heard it before, well, I guess you had to be there, and know the difference of having the same meaning but a different word where it's actually used to identify it linguistically that way. Although it might sound and mean the same, but used in a different way based upon, the word itself. But similarities with practical application that way, as it normally always is in alphanumeric linguistics, or the LA, Los Angeles thing about, linguistic alphanumerics that way. But anyway, it's already going on like an hour and 24 minutes and 33 seconds. So, I think I'm going to go ahead and take a break. That's quite a bit right there. I'm going to get this uploaded, and And yay, all right, there it is, yeah. Okay, good. Talk to you later. Have a good day, night. Yeah. Any case, it's break time. Yes. Yes, it is. It's break time. Yes. Okay, good, great. All right, have a good night. Thank you. Have a good night. Yeah.